The plain of Chaeronea lay silent, but it was filled with a palpable tension. The first light of day cast its glow over the ranks of soldiers, seasoned men and youthful warriors who waited in a heavy, expectant hush. On the left flank of the Macedonian line, a young commander stood out, though not due to inexperience. Alexander, the son of Philip II, was about to face his first major battle. At just 18 years old, his gaze already carried the intensity of a strategist shaped by a life of rigorous training and the teachings of Aristotle. The Macedonian phalanxes, formidable and disciplined, were preparing to confront the Greek coalition. This was not a mere struggle for territorial control. It was a conflict that would shape the future of a region whose city-states had long dominated Western thought, philosophy, and politics. Philip II, the man who had transformed Macedonia into a military powerhouse, was not there simply to win a battle. His ambition was to bring Greece under a unifying power. Opposite the Macedonian forces stood the united front of Athens and Thebes, representing the last stand of the city-states to defend their independence. These were seasoned warriors, hoplites trained in the harsh realities of ancient combat, fully aware that failure would spell the end of the era of independent Greek dominance. Philip observed the terrain carefully. He understood the game about to be played. His strategy relied not only on brute force, but also on shrewd tactics. Alexander, positioned on the left flank, would lead the cavalry with precise orders. Though still a novice in the political arena, this young commander already showed the promise of greatness. As the armies awaited the first move, the landscape of Chaeronea reflected the era's stark contrast. Ancient traditions clashing with military innovations. For the soldiers on both sides, this moment would be the divide between the past and the future. When the call to advance finally echoed across the field, the battle was not just a fight for territory, it was a struggle that would define an era. To grasp the significance of the Battle of Chaeronea, one must first understand the backdrop that led to this pivotal moment. By the late 4th century BCE, Greece found itself at a historic crossroads. For centuries, city-states like Athens, Sparta, and Thebes had competed fiercely, waging wars that gradually eroded their political and economic foundations. The glory of past triumphs, such as the victories in the Persian Wars and the achievements of the Delian League, was now a distant memory. As Athens struggled to recover from the devastating losses of the Peloponnesian War, a new and unforeseen threat emerged: Philip II of Macedon. He was not just a tribal king, but a visionary leader who had spent years reforming the Macedonian army. Under his command, a once disorganized force became a highly efficient war machine. He introduced groundbreaking military tactics, most notably the Macedonian phalanx, equipped with long spears called sarissas, which far outmatched the reach of traditional hoplite weapons. Macedonia, long dismissed by the Greeks as a backwater on the fringes of civilization, now demanded respect. The Greek city-states began to realize that the threat no longer came from the Persian Empire, but from within the Hellenic world itself. Philip II not only conquered territories, but also deftly wielded political power, using diplomacy to manipulate alliances and undermine resistance. Athens and Thebes, historical rivals, found themselves compelled to forge an alliance to counter the Macedonian advance. Despite their profound differences, both cities recognized that their only hope for preserving autonomy lay in presenting a united front against Philip. For many, this alliance was a bitter irony, given the centuries of rivalry that had divided them. Yet the specter of Macedonian domination loomed larger than any past enmity. The tension reached its climax at Chaeronea, a strategically vital city in Boeotia that controlled key routes linking northern and southern Greece. If Philip prevailed, Greece's gates would be thrown open, heralding the end of the city-state's independence. However, if he were defeated, the cherished ideals of Greek freedom and independence might be revived. This was a decisive moment. Philip knew that despite their internal divisions, the combined forces of Athens and Thebes posed a formidable challenge. And this is where Alexander came into the picture, a young prince trained in the art of war and taught to think like a conqueror. On the eve of the battle, Philip was not merely calculating strategies, he was testing the future of his own dynasty. This convergence of forces and tensions defined the day of the battle. On the Macedonian side, Philip II was confident in his military reforms. He knew that the Macedonian phalanx was more than a compact formation of soldiers. It was a strategic machine. Each soldier wielded a sarissa over 5 meters long, creating an impenetrable wall of spears, and they moved as a single, cohesive unit, trained to maintain formation even under intense pressure. But Philip's innovations didn't end with the phalanx. He was a master of tactical flexibility, capable of adapting his plans in real time, exploiting the enemy's expectations. On that day at Chaeronea, he intended to do just that. Positioned on the left flank was his son, Alexander, leading the cavalry. This left wing was not just another segment of the army, it was a critical element. Alexander, despite his youth, was ready to execute a decisive maneuver. On the opposing side, the forces of Athens and Thebes formed a line steeped in the tradition of the ancient city-states. The hoplite formation, with soldiers fighting shoulder to shoulder, shields and spears at the ready, was formidable. Each man understood the weight of his weapons and the importance of collective discipline. The Greek coalition believed in strength through numbers and tradition, but they were facing an adversary who had revolutionized Greek warfare with innovative tactics. As the battle commenced, the crash of shields and spears echoed across the hills of Chaeronea. The Macedonian phalanxes advanced with unerring precision, but then Philip executed a surprising maneuver, a feigned retreat. The right flank of his forces began to withdraw deliberately, as though they were losing ground. The Athenians, seeing an apparent opening for victory, pressed forward aggressively, eager to exploit the perceived weakness. They failed to realize they were being drawn into a trap. Meanwhile, the left wing, commanded by Alexander, held its position. The young commander showed no hesitation. He understood that his moment was approaching, but success depended on patience and perfect synchronization with the overall plan. As the Athenians extended their lines in pursuit of the retreating Macedonians, the cohesion of the Greek phalanxes began to waver. It was then that Philip gave the signal. The Macedonian phalanx surged forward with renewed force, while Alexander unleashed a devastating cavalry charge. The impact was ferocious. Alexander led his men with relentless intensity, targeting the Theban flank where the legendary Sacred Band of Thebes stood resolute, defending their ground with valor that had already etched itself into history. Yet the combined assault of the Macedonian cavalry and the unyielding force of the phalanx shattered the Theban formation. It was more than a physical blow, it was a psychological one, a display of the emerging dominance of a new generation of Macedonian leadership. The front lines were a scene of controlled chaos. Philip's tactic had worked with surgical precision. The hasty advance of the Athenians had left them vulnerable, their ranks disordered, while the previously retreating Macedonian phalanx now surged forward with renewed strength. Philip understood that warfare was not merely a contest of brute force, but a matter of breaking the enemy's spirit. At that moment, the Athenians could feel the momentum turning sharply against them. Meanwhile, Alexander was fully immersed in the brutality of battle. The young commander exhibited a level of leadership far beyond his years, maneuvering his cavalry with unerring precision. He launched his assault on the Theban flank, where the Sacred Band, a revered unit of warriors known for their loyalty and valor, made a determined stand. This elite brotherhood fought with unwavering courage, vowing to defend their position to the last man. But even the best defenders of Greece were no match for the combination of innovative tactics and Alexander's relentless energy. The clash was swift and bloody. Alexander, at the head of his cavalry, drove through the Theban lines like a spear piercing a shield. The Sacred Band, surrounded and unsupported, was annihilated, marking one of the most devastating moments for the Greek coalition. It was not just a military defeat, but a symbolic shattering of traditional Greek resistance. The Macedonians' reputation, especially Alexander's, began to crystallize on that battlefield. With the Theban flank collapsing, the morale of the Greek army crumbled rapidly. The hoplites, who had marched forward moments earlier with confidence, now found themselves surrounded, unable to regroup. The superior coordination and discipline of Philip's troops prevailed, and the Greek lines were broken apart, one by one. Many Greek soldiers fell where they stood, while others fled in desperation, only to be relentlessly pursued by the Macedonian cavalry. The victory at Chaeronea was overwhelming, a decisive triumph for Philip II and his army. But even more significant was the emergence of Alexander as a force to be reckoned with. That day was not merely a showcase of military power, it was a harbinger of what lay ahead. Proud and fragmented, Greece had been conquered by a united and relentless Macedon. The Macedonian triumph at Chaeronea was no chance event. It was the culmination of years of methodical preparation and visionary reforms led by Philip II. The strength of his army lay not only in technical innovations, such as the use of the sarissas and the disciplined phalanx formation, but also in Philip's masterful ability to manipulate enemy perceptions, exploiting the impulsiveness and structural weaknesses of opposing forces. The collapse of the Athenian-Theban coalition highlighted a fundamental dilemma facing the Greek city-states in the late 4th century BCE. Their persistent inability to unite effectively against a common threat. The alliance between Athens and Thebes, while symbolically important, was still riddled with internal mistrust and lacked cohesive long-term strategic coordination. Philip exploited these divisions with the acumen of a consummate strategist. His troops' feigned retreat was not an act of cowardice, but a calculated maneuver designed to unbalance his opponent. Simultaneously, the role of Alexander cannot be overstated. The leadership he displayed at Chaeronea demonstrated that he was more than just Philip's heir. He was a capable military commander, able to make swift and decisive decisions under intense pressure. His assault on the Sacred Band of Thebes was not only a testament to his courage, but also to his early understanding of battlefield dynamics. By directing his cavalry's strength against this critical point, he ensured that the most organized and morally resolute resistance within the Greek army was obliterated, sending an unmistakable message. The Macedonians were ready to dominate the Greek world. The annihilation of the Sacred Band had a profound impact. This elite unit of 300 warriors was the pride of Thebes, a force distinguished in previous wars. Their total defeat signaled that the traditional ideals of hoplite warfare, centered on honor and collective formation, had become obsolete in the face of Macedonian military efficiency and innovation. It was, in a sense, an epitaph for the old Greek way of war. With victory secured, Philip II emerged not just as the conqueror of Chaeronea, but as the hegemon of Greece. He now had the power to dictate the terms of peace and to integrate the Greek city-states under Macedonian dominance. Yet Philip did not enforce a brutal occupation. Instead, he framed his victory as a means of unification, laying the groundwork for an even greater enterprise, the invasion of Persia. He offered the Greeks a new purpose, something that many of their own city-state leaders had never envisioned. This victory also signaled the beginning of an era in which military power would increasingly be seen as a tool for integration and expansion rather than mere conquest. Philip had redefined what it meant to be a Hellenic leader. And Alexander, who had learned under his father's tutelage, was poised to carry this vision further, on a scale that even Philip would never live to witness. The Battle of Chaeronea was more than just a military victory. It marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. With the defeat of the allied forces of Athens and Thebes, Philip II of Macedon solidified his control over the Greek world. For the first time in centuries, the proud and once independent city-states found themselves under a unifying, albeit reluctant, rule. Macedonian hegemony was not merely a military achievement. It represented a political reality with far-reaching cultural and strategic consequences. Philip, in his characteristic pragmatism, chose not to completely crush his defeated adversaries. He recognized that cooperation was more valuable than sheer subjugation. In the aftermath of the battle, he established the League of Corinth, an alliance of Greek states that pledged loyalty to Macedon, yet with the promise of participating in a unified campaign against their ancient common foe, the Persian Empire. This maneuver not only secured political stability in the region, but also redirected internal tensions toward an external mission. For the citizens of Athens and Thebes, defeat was a bitter mixture of humiliation and resignation. The Athenian democracy, once the cradle of philosophy and free debate, now had to acknowledge the authority of a foreign monarch. Yet Philip understood that governing Greece required more than military might. He offered a form of collaborative governance, allowing some Greek institutions to remain intact, but always under the watchful oversight of Macedon. The victory at Chaeronea also set the stage for Alexander's destiny. He was no longer merely the king's son. He had become a proven leader. Macedonian generals and soldiers who had witnessed his courage and tactical acumen began to see him as the legitimate heir, not just to the throne, but to the spirit of conquest that defined Macedonia. This battle shaped the young prince, imbuing him with a confidence that would prove crucial in his future campaigns. Perhaps the most enduring consequence of Chaeronea was the transformation of Greece from a collection of independent states into a launchpad for imperial expansion. The notion of a unified Greece, even under foreign rule, laid the groundwork for a vision that Alexander would carry forward, a Hellenistic world where Greek culture would spread to the farthest reaches of Asia. Philip's triumph ensured that Greece's history would not conclude as a tale of internal conflicts and gradual decline. Instead, it became the springboard for an empire that Alexander, with the audacity and military genius he first displayed at Chaeronea, would build in a matter of years. Chaeronea was not just a battle won, it was a harbinger of a global empire.